Hey folks, my name is Dale Davidson, the VA guy. Thanks for tuning in today. Hey, if you like what we're doing here today, please hit that like and subscribe button. And hey, don't forget about that notification bell. That will help us out a lot, and you will be notified when we have these videos coming out periodically. We're here to help. So if you have any topics you want to hear about, leave me a comment below or send me an email at dearvaguy@gmail.com. So today's video, I'm going to be discussing the 3 fundamental requirements for obtaining service-connected disability compensation. DIC is how I call it, okay? So kind of give you an overview. Maybe you're a veteran seeking service-connected disability comp, DIC, okay? You must satisfy these essential requirements, these 3 requirements, before the VA will grant you any kind of compensation benefits. First, okay, there must be competent evidence of a current disability, not a past disability or a future disability, current disability, okay? Number 2, there's got to be some kind of medical evidence or, in certain circumstances, lay evidence of an in-service occurrence or aggravation of a disease or injury. Okay, so if you don't have medical evidence, maybe you can get, we call them buddy statements. You can get statements from your buddy saying, yes, I was there when this occurrence happened, and I remember that he hurt his knee, or whatever it may be. Okay, medical evidence will trump that always, though. All right, and the third and final fundamental requirement is that there's got to be competent evidence of a link, okay? We call it a nexus between your service occurrence or aggravation and the disease and your current disability. So a connection between your service and your disability, that's got to be there. That's the third link. So we're going to expand on all 3 of these here shortly. So again, there needs to be what the court refers to as competent evidence of each of these 3 required elements to qualify for DIC benefits. Okay, now competent evidence is usually, but not necessarily, a medical opinion. And again, we're going to break down these 3 here in just a second. So you don't have to obtain all of the evidence needed for service connection on your own. Now, the VA has a duty to assist you in trying to obtain this evidence needed to win your DIC claim. So they have it's a legal duty to assist you. And if they're not, you need to bring that to their attention. So let's go dive into these 3 requirements more in detail. The first requirement for a grant of service-connected DIC is competent evidence that you currently have a particular disability. So again, these only available to veterans with a current disability, not a past, not a future, current disability. So you're not eligible for compensation simply because you contracted a disease or suffered an injury while in active service or on active duty. So many veterans experience illness or injuries in service that left no lasting symptoms. Okay, these medical conditions are considered, they call it acute or transitory, and so there's no basis in the VA benefit rules or the DIC rules for acute or transitory illnesses. Okay, so in addition, simply proving exposure to things like Agent Orange, if you were in Vietnam, or the DMZ, or exposure to the burn pits in Persian Gulf War, Afghanistan, or exposure to the water at Camp Lejeune, okay, is not sufficient to establish entitlement to DIC disability comp, okay? You've got to have a connection there. You've got to meet all 3 of these, okay? So to be entitled to compensation, you've got to prove that you have a current disability or current disabling residuals from the in-service disease or injury. If you can't show this, you're not going to have a claim. Well, what is competent evidence? Competent evidence is required to establish the first element of service connection. So the existence of a current disability, that's the first fundamental requirement, okay? Disability does not have to be a specific medical diagnosis for service connection to be granted, but you've got to have a current disability. Now, what about pain? So pain not connected to a medical diagnosis meets the current disability requirement if it results in a functional loss. Okay? Regardless though, the disability still needs to be described as specifically as possible and diagnosed if possible for the VA to be able to fit you within the category of that disability or that rating decision. So in other words, a lot of people say, well, I experience pain, but then your doctor can't diagnose where exactly that pain is manifests from or coming from, but you're still experiencing pain, and so that has you have a functional loss. You're not prohibited from receiving DIC, but you really ought to try to get a pinpoint where that pain is started at, okay, or radiates from. Except for claims for certain disabilities suffered by Gulf War veterans as to undiagnosed illnesses, evidence that you have, say, a knee condition or a back injury or mental disorder is not enough. You've got to be more precise. So your diagnosis of a current disability almost always involves medical issues. So you have competent medical evidence is often still needed, okay, as to going a long way to proving your current disability. Now remember, pain alone without an accompanying diagnosis of a present disease can qualify as a disability for VA disability comp purposes. For example, let's say that you experienced and got treatment for your knee pain during your service. The VA examiner who examined you with respect to your claim for service-connected says you've got a bilateral knee pain and found that it would result in an increased absenteeism and affected your ability to complete daily activities. So because of your knee pain, you wouldn't be able to go to work, okay? Because of your knee pain, you can't do certain activities of daily living that you would normally be able to do, like go walk down the grocery store aisle and pick up groceries, driving, okay? Those kinds of activities of daily living you couldn't do. So for VA disability comp purposes, the term disability refers to the functional impairment of earnings capacity. So if your disability impacts your earning capacity, that is your disability, okay? Not the underlying cause of the disability, okay? Let me repeat that. So for VA disability comp purposes, the term disability refers to the functional impairment of your earnings capacity and not the underlying cause of your disability. That's an important distinction. Because pain in the absence of a presently diagnosed condition can cause functional impairment, it can constitute a disability, a current disability for VA comp purposes. All right, the second requirement for service-connected DIC is competent medical or, in certain circumstances, lay evidence of an in-service occurrence or aggravation of a disease or injury. So let's say something happened to you in service and you had an in-service incident. Now you've got to submit some kind of evidence with your claim to prove that the disease or injury or event caused or aggravated your current disability, okay? And that it did happen in service. Now, things that could stop you from being able to prove this would be if you had misconduct on your part. Maybe you drunk driving or some kind of reckless misconduct that could be used against you that says, well, because of your reckless misconduct, you did this to yourself intentionally. So that can really put a damper on your claim. So the kind of triggering circumstances that can be used to establish service connection is really nearly unlimited, only by making sure that you didn't have any kind of misconduct. So how do you show service connection? Okay. Now, your lay or medical evidence in the record must demonstrate at a minimum that it is as likely as not, key words here, is as likely as not that there was an in-service occurrence or an event that happened while you were in service or an aggravation of the disease. So it's more likely than not that your disability was caused by your service. Okay? That's a key. Okay? You must have at least enough evidence to show a 50% chance that the disease or injury or event triggered the current disability, and it happened during service. Okay? Now, if there's any kind of conflicting evidence, then the VA is going to weigh the positive evidence against the negative evidence and make a finding of fact as to whether or not you experienced this particular event or injury or disease of service. So they're going to take the good and the bad there. All right. So we've gone through 1 and 2. Remember, 1 is that you've got a current disability requirement. Okay, and then number 2, the current disability occurred during your service. So number 3, this is the third and final requirement, which this is the nexus requirement. So with respect to this third requirement, we've got to decide whether the disability is service connected or whether the service connection has even been established. This is the nexus requirement. So of those 3 requirements, fundamental requirements, the most common reason the VA claims for DIC are not successful is because you haven't been able to prove this nexus. And so you can't prove that there's some kind of connection between your current disability and your military service. You may file a disability claim and have a current disability, and you remember things that happened during your military service. Okay, so you've applied for the VA for DIC because you believe that there's a connection between your current disability and the things that you remember that happened during your military service. So we've got to have some kind of evidence there to show that that your service in the military is connected to your disability. So the difference between success and failure in DIC claims usually involves this connection process, this nexus process. Your connection between your current disability and your military service. How do you establish this nexus? Okay, there are basically five ways. There's a direct service connection between your current disability and something that occurred during your period of military service. Maybe you were diagnosed with this disability while in service, and so you were medically discharged. Okay. Maybe you were injured in combat or during training or whatever, so there's medical evidence, so we know that you have this knee pain as a result of you jumping out of perfectly good airplanes and you busted up your knee when you hit the ground. So you have medical, that's a direct connection. Okay. Number 2, your current disability is a condition that pre-existed your service but was aggravated or became worse during service. This is known as aggravation. In a previous video, I had a client who had PECs, and the service claimed that he had a pre-existing condition, so they denied his DIC claim. But what they didn't do that correctly. because what happened is they ignored the aggravation. So in this case, we were able to prove the connection because of the aggravation. Okay. Number 3, your current disability is a condition that did not come about, manifest itself, or didn't show up during your service, but is presumed to have started or is connected to something that you experienced in service. Okay. This is presumptive service connection. Okay. For instance, you have a specific kind of cancer because of your exposure to Agent Orange. That's a presumptive connection. You have a specific medical condition related to your exposure to burn pits. That's a presumptive connection. Okay. Number 4, the current disability is caused or aggravated by a primary medical condition, and that primary medical condition is connected to your military service. That's a secondary service. So let's say that I have knee problems. Okay, I busted my knees in the service. Okay, and so that's a direct connection, right? But because I favor my right knee, then I start having hip problems. Okay, so that's a secondary condition. So there's always, because our body works in mysterious ways, there's usually always a secondary condition that we need to explore. And number 5, the current condition is the consequence of an injury caused by the VA healthcare, training. We're talking like a medical malpractice type claim. Okay, that's the other connection. So in summary, there are 3 overriding considerations that should be kept in mind when reviewing the 5 basic ways of service connection. Okay, so in deciding a disability claim, the VA's got to consider whether you are entitled to disability under each method. So they're going to go down that list of 5. Okay, and so even if you don't raise it, they're going to look to see if it's reasonably related or reasonably raised in the record, not just what you have claimed. But you got to be careful. You got to check behind them. Okay, they're human too. If you've got a secondary claim, make it. Okay. Second, and by far, I think the most important consideration in presenting a DIC claim for most service theories is the evidence showing the link or nexus or connection to your service. I'm telling you, from my experience, that's always better through medical evidence. Talk to your doctors and say, look, I think I served in Vietnam. I think my cancer is related to my service in Vietnam, or my injury, whatever it was, is related. Let that doctor give you his or her opinion of the connection. Okay, we've got to have a connection, otherwise we don't have anything. And third, because you're not saddled with a high standard of proof, okay, the degree of certainty of a nexus to service that the medical evidence needs to show is not as difficult as it seems. So we've been able to go back, for instance, with the person who was aggravated, we were able to go back and the doctor who was examining him said, yes, based, reviewed all these medical evidence based upon his service and his condition, that his condition was aggravated during his time with service, and it was directly related to, in my opinion, said the doctor, to his exposure to burn pits. So using the direct service connection method of satisfying that nexus requirement, okay, for example, there need to be only medical evidence stating that in the doctor's opinion, your expert's opinion, it's at least likely as not, or it's more likely than not, however you want to say it, that your current disability resulted from that disease or injury or triggering service. So, I know I said a lot here today. I apologize for the length of this video, but it's important because those 3 fundamental requirements are key to a successful claim. So hey folks, thank you for tuning in today. If you like what we're doing here, or if you learned something new, and we hope you did, please hit that like and subscribe button. Do us a favor, let your friends and family know about us. Send them links to the channel. Tell them, hey, look at this guy. He's got some good things to say. He's helped us out a lot as far as answering some questions. Whatever it may be, just share our channel, okay? So if you need help with a DIC claim, if you're kind of unsure about the Nexus issue, you want to just drop us a line. We'll try to point you in the right direction. If you have any topics you want me to discuss, leave me a comment below or send me an email at dearvaguy@gmail.com. So look, in all seriousness now, to all you veterans, thank you for your service. And to, hey, spouses of veterans, thank you for keeping the home fires burning, okay? And for those currently serving our country and their spouses or partners, a big, big thank you for protecting us and our way of life. So today, look, I want each of you to go out in today's messed up world. Be confident in yourself. Keep your head high, put a smile on your face, and go out and make a difference in somebody's life. So until next time, you be blessed.
No more whiskey, I'll have a Coke. Catching bass on an old fishing boat. One more story from Grandpa Joe.